So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce myself, introduce the panel, and explain a little bit about what's going to go on today in terms of housekeeping as well. But we're not going to do that for too long. We're just going to jump straight in, answer as many questions as possible because we've got a lot of them. And obviously we're talking about employee well-being and what comes next. So it's a very expansive question, big question. We talk a little bit about short-term, mid-term and long-term. But before getting into that, I'm going to invite everyone to get a bit of energy in the room. So if you want to stand up, now would be an amazing time to do so. If you're sitting down, it's absolutely fine, don't worry about it. But we are going to get involved. So if you're standing up, arms above head, down, up, down, up, down, up. You're going to start breathing out when you bring your hands down. So breathing out. Good, good. I'm just going to roll my shoulders back. Good. I'm going to bring out my arms. Careful you don't hit anything. Arms coming out a little bit wider. Nice. I'm moving my feet around as well. If I'm standing up, I'm moving. For no particular reason, I'm going to spin around in a circle to my left. Beautiful. I'm going to spin around to the right, again, for no real reason. Nice. I'm just going to roll my wrists around in front of the camera. I'm going hands out, in, out, in, out, in. Good. You've got 10 seconds to freestyle. Do whatever you want at this point. Get a bit of energy in your body, get a bit of blood flowing. Beautiful, Julie. I don't know, that looks great. You've got 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Nice, folks. All right, thanks. So you're wondering what the hell you've signed up to. There is a reason we do that. Won't bore you with the science of it, but you're going to learn a little bit more, and it is just quite funny to watch. So I can see a bunch of people still signing in, which is great. I'm just going to share my screen, everyone, and introduce us to the topic for today, which is employee well-being. What next? So what does that actually mean? As I mentioned before, big topic today. We've chosen this topic based on just what we've heard, the questions we've been asked. So thank you if you did send in questions. We pretty much got 90% of today based on what you've wanted us to put to the panel, which is absolutely fantastic. So in terms of housekeeping, I'd just ask that we all turn our camera on. Most of us already have, I think, which is fantastic. If you feel comfortable, just makes for a nicer environment. Everything we say is confidential. Mental health and other topics might well come up today, so please feel the free space. Polling, we're going to make use of that through the session. And if you are on mute, if you want to contribute to discussion or ask a question yourself, remember to come off mute, because inevitably someone's going to do that and it will be funny. And we're also going to, last but not least, make use of the chat. So down the bottom of your screen, you see an option to chat. You can post extra questions in there as we go. And you can also let myself or Adam and Marina know, who are also from the Innerfit team today, helping facilitate conversation and raise those questions to the top of mind. So, all right, all the boring stuff out the way. Who are we talking to today? I'm going to introduce Nick, firstly, very quickly. Absolute legend, health and performance coach. He's led teams, led expeditions up Kilimanjaro. He's currently working with the NHS Improvement Service, so on the front line, really, and helping the NHS on that side of things. Also does leadership training and focuses a lot on energy and resilience. So super interesting to have you on, Nick. Thank you very much. We've got Lisa from AWIN. She's Global Marketing Director, responsible for pushing the wellbeing agenda at AWIN. Recently wrote a blog about that, actually, which we'll be sharing afterwards, which is fantastic. And also daughter of Willow, who I've had the pleasure of seeing on a few recent calls, and very well managing that through the last 12 weeks. And then lastly, Mike Seaman, I think, will be joining us shortly. He's a busy man, CEO and founder of Raccoon Events, who actually hosts the National Running Show and the National Outdoor Expo. And obviously the events industry has been particularly hit, along with a few others. But he turned that around and ended up doing the indoor relay, which was a month's worth of running. Thousands of people got involved, and they raised over £50,000 for charity in the end. So, panel, if you want to give a quick wave, let everyone know who you are, where you are. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So without further ado, I just wanted to kick off and ask how you are doing. Nick, if I could come to you first. One thing we'd love to do at Innerfit is ask how you're feeling, because that oxygen mask analogy that we use, you've got to take care of yourself before you try and take care of others. I think particularly when it comes to people responsible for employee well-being and the well-being of other people, we can all be a little bit guilty of maybe trying to help and not necessarily focus on ourselves. So just to kick off, I'd love to ask Nick, if you'd be happy going first. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, thank you very much. Lovely to meet you all, and welcome to kind of the Innerfit network. If you haven't been to one of these before, it's awesome to work with Chris and the other guys here and kind of engage in this space. So how am I doing? It's never an easy question to answer at the moment. I think this moment today, I think I'm kind of on the overwhelmed spectrum with everything that I've got on my plate professionally, I would say, and also having a 7-month-old baby indoors. It makes for a very busy life. So I think you know, I'm doing well. I consider myself very grateful, very fortunate for having lots of opportunities. But from my perspective, so I am a paramedic clinically by background. So when the COVID stuff all started, I went straight back on the front line and have just gone through a cycle of doing lots of frontline ambulance work, which has been quite tough. And now the NHS England kind of coaching and leadership team are crazy busy with lots of support in the GP space. So there's lots going on basically at the moment. So I think I'm doing really well. It's sunny. I live in Brighton. I can go for a swim every morning. But I think, like lots of people, you know, the uncertainty, the overwhelm, the current climate is affecting me, and potentially, you know, it's something I want to be really mindful moving forwards. And ensure that, you know, it's not this kind of snapshot short period of 2020, which will be forgotten fairly soon, I hope, doesn't have any lingering effect. So kind of my mind is on the future and kind of understanding what's going on with me at the moment.
Thanks, Nick. That's partly why we got you on, because we'll be digging into that a little bit more. Lisa, how are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for asking. I, much like Nick, I think obviously up and down days. I think today's a particularly good day. Sun is shining. Like Nick said, you can't really complain too much when you see that. Yeah, I think it's been tough. You know, I've got a daughter. She's 3. She does not sleep through the night. I'm a single parent, so that's a lot of fun, obviously working full time and being up for several hours a night. It was my birthday this weekend, and my best friend came and stayed at the house and took over on night duty. So I had 2 whole nights sleep in a row. So this comes at a really good timing because I'm very refreshed now. But yeah, overall things are going really well. I think the team is in a good place and feels quite supported. I think we've been doing a lot at AWIN, which I'm looking forward to talking about on this call, to support the teams through this time, and obviously the outlook of what we're going to be doing across the next kind of 6, 9, 12 months and beyond, to ensure that wellness is front in mind. So overall doing quite well, but could do with a little bit more sleep.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good. You're always on good form whenever I talk to you.
Oh, thank you. A lot of caffeine.
And Mike, I believe you are here somewhere. So Mike, how are you doing? If you want to say a quick hello to everyone, that'd be fantastic. Where's Mike? All right, well, we'll sit tight for Mike to arrive in a sec. And the first question I wanted to ask you folks, and Mike can loop in when we do sort that out, is what's been your journey for the last 3 months or so in terms of the team's well-being, or working with teams when it comes to well-being, more for you, Nick, just to set the context at the beginning, because it feels like we're definitely going into a bit of a transition phase. Conversations we've had at Innerfit in the last couple of weeks, people have been starting to think about going back to work. Obviously, we had Boris's announcement last night, and there's going to be some big business changes for companies that have maybe not been beneficiaries of all of this and need to think a little bit differently. So Lisa, maybe if you want to kick us off on that one in terms of the last 12 weeks or so up to now.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. Becky wants to jump in, I think, for 1 second.
Yes, go.
Hi, sorry. I actually gave Mike my link, and now he's coming in under my name. So Mike is here. He just is coming in as me.
I'm sure he's very happy with that. Okay, so what does that mean for Mike's contribution to today? Is he still game, or are Lisa and Nick saving the show?
I think that means you can hear me now because you've just unmuted me, right?
Yes, Mike.
Can you see my face? I mean, it's probably a good thing. I'll pretend to look like Becky. So yes, I'm in. I don't know. Sorry, I think Nick was halfway through talking. So Nick, do you want to finish off?
No, we're passing over to Lisa, I think, if you can still remember the question.
Yes, what we've been doing across the last kind of 3 months or so. Yeah, so obviously everyone's been remote working obviously throughout this time. And it was interesting. Thankfully, we kind of already were big champions of flexible working before this. So we had a lot of teams that worked from home on and off. It was never fully home working, but we offered that as a benefit. So people were kind of used to working from home, but pretty much overnight it switched to the whole company. And we've got, over 1,000 people at AWIN. So it was a little bit scary, I think, for HR and for IT right off the bat, but it worked really well. And I think, the important thing was making sure that everyone felt connected virtually. So one of the first things we implemented was, before, where you might just have a normal phone call, all calls had to be done by video chat, which the first day was really funny for me because I did a workout that morning, not realizing it, then had a call with my board, and I was a sweaty, disgusting, non-showered mess. It was hilarious. So I learned my lesson very quickly on that one. But yeah, and I think that really helped, because very often, especially if you're even having a quick phone call, you might not turn your cameras on, but I think for the teams really felt much more connected to people, knowing that they could see faces. We implemented having like team coffee chats once a week. So the idea of these calls was that you don't talk at all about work. It was more so, what's going on in your personal life. We have a few people that are pregnant in my team. So asking how that's going, how they're coping with being off. Obviously, we went through a massive heat wave through spring, talking about getting outside and enjoying some fresh air and things like that. So yeah, I think it was really making sure that people kind of still felt connected. We also launched this really great thing on our intranet that was called Life at AWIN. And it was kind of championed by our mix of HR, marketing, and what we call our like global social committee, if you will. And it had things like wellness tips, recipes, ideas for meditation apps. We did fun little things like cooking challenges and AWIN's Got Talent, and just like a community kind of space so that people could really get involved, and not just within their own teams, but across the entire organization. And it was brilliant. We had so much engagement through that. People really appreciated it. And so much so that it's expanded out to become what we're now calling like a wellness space, and is really going to be owned and championed by our HR department. That they're going to keep updating with ongoing tips, workouts, links to workouts that were on there, and different things like that. So that was sort of what we've done for the last 3 months at a quick win that was not very expensive kind of way of getting everybody sort of feeling like a bit more of a community still through this time.
Thanks, Lisa. I think quick wins, we're going to try and scatter through this as well. We want to get really practical. So I think we can talk theoretically about the big picture and what next, but then to have specific examples and concrete things people can take away is really, really helpful. Nick, how about yourself from a perspective from the NHS side, or working on the front line? Yeah,
so obviously I can give you kind of a cross section of two things that might be relevant. So obviously being back in the front line, I don't like that expression. I'm ex-military, and the front line has a very different connotation for me. No one was shooting at me, but yeah. So being in primary healthcare and in pre-hospital care was challenging, because we were suddenly faced with a much higher percentage of really sick patients, which might sound a bit strange for a paramedic to say that, but anyway, so there was a lot more pressure, a lot more stress in that environment, and that started to show on the workforce generally. Obviously I'm kind of in the trenches in that role, so it was really important for me to stay in touch with my friendship network within that fraternity, and maintain strong bonds between the people that I really got on with well. And I think that can transpose directly to any work environment and team environment, really. Let's not use the word work, because we spend our large proportion of our life doing this thing. So that's that kind of the pre-hospital care component, which has been a challenging landscape. But I'm also now from a kind of leadership and cultural perspective working with GP practices, and it's fascinating to understand the changes that they've gone through in primary healthcare. So overnight they've shut their doors, doing a lot more phone consultations with patients, but that means that a very traditional structure, and believe me, doctors' practices are incredibly old school compared to most, I would say, businesses these days. So the culture's completely changed overnight, basically. Everyone's working from home. People that have been in that business for 20, 30 years never worked from home, never done a video call or anything like that. So culturally, they've had a massive transition, and that was really hard for them to embed. So hearing the stories now and working with these practices to try and enhance their kind of well-being, I guess, or that's not necessarily the hat I wear there, is basically what Lisa was saying, which is ensuring you have these connections and these check-ins that aren't business focused, aren't work orientated specifically. They're specifically focused as tea breaks or as social gatherings, e-gatherings, what you might call them. The other thing that I think is really pertinent as a leader is understanding within your team the people how people would normally interact, and the potential warning signs of someone that might not be interacting up to their normal level, or an individual that perhaps you understand won't necessarily get on with the technology as well as someone else. I don't want to be ageist and drop any bombshells, but yeah, and having that awareness and having that check-in, and also this is the point I think where leaders really have to do the extra work and understand the team dynamics, who's friends with who and who can support each other, because it's all very well being kind of the be-all and end-all, but ultimately it's the people, the peer group that are best suited to support each other. So that awareness and that kind of elevated awareness has been really interesting and important, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. I suppose we've got two very different contexts, but communication coming through is a bit of a common thread, and then some more specific things we can come on to a little bit around technology and the use of that as well. But I think more broadly as well, the point that it's accelerated a few opportunities but challenges as well. So Mike, just to bring yourself in, and we skipped, I know you're under the name of Becky at the moment, but we missed a little bit at the beginning to ask how are you doing, how are you feeling, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about your indoor relay experience and how you made that happen. So whilst we do that, folks, I'd love to ask everyone else how they're feeling as well. So if you've got one word that would summarize how you're feeling at the moment today, if you just want to paste that in the chat, just be as honest as you would like to be, really. It's an open forum, everything's confidential. But if you want to say you're feeling great or you're feeling really rubbish, whatever that word is for you, put it in the chat. I'd love to know how you're doing. So that said, Mike, how are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm optimistic. I'm quite an optimistic creature by nature, I think. I think it's just my default setting. I'd be lying if I said over the last 3 months I've been optimistic every single day, because that's certainly not been true. As somebody who runs an exhibition business at a time when exhibitions aren't allowed to go ahead, it's had its challenges and it's had its ups and downs. But we feel like we've probably come through that now, and we've had some real successes over the last couple of weeks, which have shifted our business around. And some of that's been by using digital, some of that's been by clear and clever thinking and decisive thinking, but at a slower pace, and then some of it by comms, and generally by just sort of taking it slow and steady, not making rash decisions, and bringing everybody along with us. And then you asked about the indoor relay. So the indoor relay was so obviously we had a period where we had a bit of time on our hands, and it felt like a lot of the news that we were hearing was all really negative, and there was a lot of stuff going out that was, oh, the world's in a bad place, everybody's suffering. Charities were struggling to raise money. A lot of charities rely on things like mass participation sporting events to raise money. So London Marathon can raise tens of millions of pounds in one weekend, for example. So we had loads of charities that were suffering. We had loads of people who were at that point locked into one outdoor exercise per day, and not everybody was actually able to take that. So we wanted to do something. So me and a friend of mine, Raoul, we came up with this idea about doing an indoor relay where we would pass the baton via Zoom for a Zoom meeting that ran for a month, and we would keep people running within the boundary of their house. Everyone would come and do an hour session, and then they would pass it on to the next person. And we ran it for 30 days. We raised about £45,000 for charity. We had some celebs come and join in and things like that. And it was all volunteered. Everything that we did was free. So my team supported it for free. A web guy, the company called Vartu, donated a website for free. Loads of people just turned up and helped out. And it was really a sign of that people didn't want to feel impotent in the whole process. Like, people didn't just want to sit there and feel powerless. They all wanted to do something constructive, and that really shone through in the relay, I think. And I think there's some lessons from that have shone through to business.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. So on that train of thought then, and lessons for business, let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll just open up a broader question on what challenges and opportunities we're facing at the moment in terms of employee wellbeing and the wellbeing of our teammates. I'd love to, Lisa, maybe if I come to you first, because I know your blog touches on the bigger question, slightly like that. What are the biggest opportunities and challenges that we're facing at the moment when it comes to employee wellbeing?
So if we look at challenges first, I think keeping a remote workforce is always going to be a challenge, because how do you keep that engagement? And I love Mike's story on that. I'm actually going to probably message you after that to get loads of tips on that, because I think that's a fabulous idea. And I think it's really important that, it is going to be a challenge to keep everyone sort of engaged and motivated and making them feel that they're still part of a team and a community and all of that. So I think a big part of that is while people are still remote working, and even when people go back to the office, very often with the social distancing, this idea of, I went 12 weeks without having a hug. I mean, that's a long time for not having any sort of human interaction. I think we need to be really mindful of that it's not just about the challenges that people are facing in work. I think a lot of it's way beyond that, and it's what they're facing in their personal life and how that's impacting their work. And I think that's really, we have to really kind of make sure that we're being really mindful of that. And I think as we move forward and people are going back to the work, back to the offices, and you're only allowed a 30% workforce in there, and how you're going to kind of manage that and making people still feel as part of that community. I think there's going to be some challenges around that, and changing office spaces to feel, to really feel that, and carrying on this, the importance of wellness and well-being in messaging and in this kind of community feel, whether it's through an intranet or through messages that you're sending, or even some of the team calls. It was funny, as some of the as lockdown restrictions eased in Germany, for example, the team were like, oh, can we start doing these coffee chats every other week instead of every week? Whereas in the UK, we were like, well, we like having them every week because we're still locked indoors. So just a different shift in mindset. And especially for us as a global business, just being really, acutely aware of the different cultures, the different regions, the different things that are happening in each of these markets. So I think that's going to probably be one of the challenges that we're certainly looking at, and keeping kind of front in mind, and how we're going to address that. From an opportunity perspective, I mean, the opportunities are incredibly vast. I think there's so many things that we're looking to do. And I know that we'll come on to that when we're looking kind of more future thinking, but, our board has already started looking at, like, how do we iterate on what we're doing now with remote working, and carry this through in the longer term. And one of the things that we did during this time that I forgot to mention as part of what we've done a lot across the last 3 months, which is probably a really valid point, was went to a 4.5-day work week. So we gave everyone in the company Friday afternoons off. And the idea was, it came as like a family first sort of message. It was like, because so many people in the business have families and small children, to really make them feel like they're not just tied to their computers all the time, especially being locked indoors for most of it, to then not being able to have that time with their family. But it was open to everybody. So if you didn't have small children or children at all, you were able to kind of enjoy the half of the day on a Friday, and enjoy a longer weekend to do whatever it was that you want to do. So whether that's interests or hobbies, exercise, and so forth. And it was so successful during this period that we're carrying that forward, and making sure that everyone still benefits from having a 4.5-day week. And it's proven how productive people can still be, even in less time, because they want to make sure they get all their work done and they're doing everything really well, so that they can enjoy that time. And we're going to iterate on that going forward, that starting in January, we're going to go down to a 4-day work week for the entire business. And so which is incredible. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've worked on a 4-day work week since I came back from maternity 2.5 years ago. And it's incredible, because I always have Fridays with my daughter. So I always have a 3-day weekend with her. And it's a benefit that I've always really relished. And it's been so great for my time with her. But to know that the entire business is going to get to benefit from that it's a complete game changer. And I've had loads of people messaging me, because a few in my team were like, well, how am I going to fit everything into 4 days? And I'm a big advocate of that, because I'm like, well, this is how you do it, kind of thing. You know, it is down to prioritizing, and you don't spend as much time faffing about because you want to have that day. So I think, you know, businesses that are really going to kind of take notice of the benefit of what's worked during this time and carry that forward and iterate on it to make sure that people feel supported, that they feel that their mental and physical health is being supported. We also use a Pecan survey where we ask people questions every couple of weeks. You know, how are you feeling? Do you feel like someone in AWIN supports your well-being, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever it might be? And we use those scores to iterate on things. You know, sometimes the scores will say, well, actually, I sit behind my desk all day, so no, I don't feel I can live a physically active lifestyle. So things that we've done, we've started putting in like yoga classes at noon and a Tai Chi class at 3 p.m. and a HIIT training class at 10 a.m. So you can pick and choose throughout the day. And normalizing, I talk about this in my article, but normalizing this idea of taking time away that's not first thing in the morning or when you finish work, but step away from your computer at any point in the day for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it's going to be, so that you can focus on your own well-being and you come back even more refreshed. So I think more businesses and senior leaders that push that message and that agenda, they're going to get so much more out of their staff. And that's what I think is a really big opportunity, is for people to take note of that and really embrace it.
Wow.
Sorry, I know I speak really quickly, by the way, so sorry.
That's exactly why we wanted you on. There's just so much there. I almost wish that I just asked about challenges first and then saved.
Sorry.
For anyone who couldn't quite keep up with all of the comments in there and the important points made, we are recording the session, so we'll have a recording afterwards available on the website. And there's so much in there in terms of engagement and different cultures. So I know we've got a lot of people on the call at the moment, from smaller companies right through to bigger companies, from hundreds to tens of thousands. And so I think the difference between different teams and cultures, and Nick, to your point before about peer groups, I think that's an important one to remember. So thank you, Lisa. Mike, I'll come to you in a second for opportunities. I think, Nick, if you want to add anything to follow up on in terms of the challenges side particularly.
I think Lisa covered so much there. Fantastic job. I clearly know what you're talking about. But I think, for me, you know, everything always comes back down to the fundamentals. And you know, I'm a big believer in happiness leads to success, and it's not the other way around. And we've gone through this period that I think is going to be pretty unique to our generation, or a few generations of people around, you know, in the working force at the moment, however you categorize it. And you know, there are incredible opportunities, and I do believe that. And I'm a bit like Mike, who I know. Hi, Mike. You know, it's great to be forward thinking and forward looking, and we have to be. But the challenge for me is wider spread. There's lots of challenges at the moment. Everyone's got their own personal kind of situation, but the challenge is this fundamental rocking of our basic safety and security requirement that we all have inbred in our kind of reptilian brain. So that has been shaken for pretty much every human on the planet. And it's kind of how we individually rebuild that and go through the process, and don't just skip over it, thinking about kind of our self-actualization or anything else, and we stick with the fundamentals and the basics, get those right, and also realize that the time it's going to take to kind of get our heads around what's happened. Everyone's going to be different, so I think that for me, that's the big challenge, is kind of just understanding what's going on an individual level. The other big challenge, I think, is, which also is like most things, it flips onto an opportunity. For me, the big challenge has been this, I'm going to be controversial, this kind of media bubble that we've been living in, and at times it feels like the decision makers have been living in that media bubble as well, getting fed a lot of negative news, and it's been kind of, you know, our eyes have all turned square from kind of being glued to these daily updates. That for me is a major challenge, but hopefully flipping that around, hopefully that's given people an opportunity to really question what information they're imbibing on a daily basis, and how important it is to control what's going on with your bandwidth, and control the things that you're inputting and interpreting.
So I suppose that links a little bit to the safety and security piece, because the one question for me that came up from your first point, Nick, was on okay, so how do we take care of that reptilian brain and feel safer and more secure, and how long does that take, acknowledging that everyone's different? Maybe that's too difficult a thing to just chunk off in one quick answer.
Yeah, It's a good question. I'm not sure I'm best placed to answer it. I don't have a simple answer. How long will it take? It is an individual solution. Depends on your kind of family setup. But you know, for me, if I talk about myself, everyone's favorite subject. But for me, it will things will start to change when we're out seeing friends, you know, giving people hugs and kind of interacting at that level. You know, I think for me, we have to flip back to kind of being human.
No, and Mike, you're a people person and love hugs. So if we think about Nick's point about turning challenge into opportunity, and the opportunities that we've got to look forward to and can try and create, have you got any thoughts on that topic?
Cultural shift in a business is such a difficult thing to do, and the big opportunity around this is it has happened to every single person. They have shifted the way that they work, they've shifted the way that they live, and they've changed everything in such a rapid space of time. And that's both a threat and an opportunity, and it comes with, on a personal level, sort of emotional and physical issues, and on a professional level, emotional and physical issues. And as we return back, we have the opportunity to reshape our corporate structure in light of those changes. But you've got to layer in the individuals over the top of that. So you can't just bring them back to something completely alien and different. But now is the time to try some of those things perhaps that you've always wanted to do and just never got around to doing because it was too hard to implement. So what does that mean in reality? Well, we've always said we're accountability based, not hours based. So we don't have a specific working day structure. We have outputs, and that's how we measure people. And you know, we have a lot of people that work around the kids and the school run and things like that, and that's really important to me that we support those guys. And we've had to take that on a step now and actually implement it, because we found ourselves creeping into 9 to 5 days for some people's hours. So we're starting to put in specific sort of physical gaps in the day where we can have an exercise hour as well as a lunch hour, which is different, because that's very important to us as a health and wellbeing events business. That's a physical thing that we can put in. We have a start of the week Zoom call, because some of our team are remote, not everybody's based in the office here. So we were kind of doing that, but on and off, and now we've got them fixed in time and we're going to do it. Then we've changed the way the whole space looks, and with the way that we're managing the people and their return, we're actually consulting them on the way that they return, and we're offering them to tie into our others. So we've got big sustainability goals. We want to become carbon neutral on the event as an events business, which is really difficult in my field. So actually a lot of the traveling that we were doing to go and see clients, we can now swap in technology like Zoom, which if I could have made it work today would have looked really cool, but I didn't. But you know, things like that are now embedded and part of the culture, and people are actually a lot more willing to change. So I think now is a big opportunity, but you have to be really careful that you don't do some big institutional change which upsets people and actually makes it more scary coming back to work. So we've done all sorts of return to work surveys, both around the sort of the risk assessed physical stuff about, you know, where you go, how you sit, how you clean your desk, what materials you use and bring into the office, but also around the emotional side of it as well, which I think is equally as important.
Thank you.
A long, waffly answer to your question.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely superb. Thank you. And I think it's probably about time. We're over halfway. I haven't actually given anyone else an opportunity to ask any questions. So I've got some written down here that people asked in advance. Philippa, you've been very kind in making yourself vulnerable and sharing the idea that you hadn't actually touched a human since the week commencing the first week of March, basically. So if you've got a question for the panel, guys, I'd love for the second half to really not do much myself and hand over to you guys. I'm going to read through some of what was answered in terms of how we're feeling while you have a little think about any questions you got for the panel. Some people made better use of this chat than others, I guess. Some people just said they were hot. Philip, I think you said sunny, which is good. I guess that's a feeling. What else? I think Jeffrey, you said you're hungry, which is fantastic. I don't know if Jeffrey's still on or not. But we had a few optimistics, a few mixed, I suppose. So without wanting to talk too much myself. Has anyone got a question they would like to fire at the panel? Anne-Marie,
Yeah.
Philippa, perhaps, or yeah.
I'm happy to go ahead. Hi. Much like Mike, you were just mentioning, you were asking your employees how they feel about coming back to work. We've recently done something very similar and did a returning to the office and a wellbeing and mental health survey. And what we found is that there was a very, very strong correlation between how people felt about their we asked them if they feel good, okay, or not good, and if they feel connected to the business and their teams. And there's a very strong correlation between feeling negative in those questions and not feeling connected to their team. So if they said they're not connected to their team, they also said that they don't feel supported by the company and they don't feel like good and okay. Do you have, then this opens to everyone, but any kind of tips and advice for making those people feel connected? And I think particularly in teams where, you know, not all of our teams are very strong managers or strong experienced managers, and some of our other teams have done loads of the great things that Lisa spoke about, of sharing recipes, and they've had online concerts and stuff, and they feel very connected, and then they, as a result, feel that their well-being is really strongly supported. But for those teams where those managers struggle, or even peers struggle to stay connected, if you have any tips and advice on how to do that with zero budget.
Yeah, I think the digital technology we have available to us is your friend in this situation, and things like Zoom are such great tools, and you can layer over things which are essentially opportunities for people to collide, like pub quizzes, one-to-one sessions, team meetings. And if you've got a weaker manager in there, then you can then manufacture a way to make that a broader conversation, maybe getting two teams together or adding another person to give it an agenda, which might be bringing in someone else to run a quiz across team, or teams to blend and work across. So to try and replicate that sort of bumping into each other at the coffee machine / water cooler type thing, you can actually take control of it. And that's where the video technology really does help, because what we found is that people felt a lot more connected when there was face-to-face time as opposed to ear-to-ear.
Okay. Have you had any problems if that is helpful, but have you had any problems with Zoom fatigue as a result? Because we're just starting to feel that now as well, that it's just oh my God, we're staring at a screen all the time and it's getting tiring. So it's that balance between Zoom fatigue but also feeling connected as well.
And I think that's where we've put in structures around the day to make sure that people are taking those exercise hours and those breaks as well, because you're dead right, it can become, staring at a screen becomes actually more tiring, weirdly, than being on a phone. So structured breaks throughout the day, and because again we're health and well-being, we encourage people to go outside and run or walk and take pictures and post them on Instagram and things like that. So it's kind of all part of our brand.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose Zoom fatigue is definitely a thing we've seen now, Anne-Marie. So whether you're in the music industry or the events industry or health and well-being, Zoom fatigue is definitely not the first time we've heard that. So it's asking the question, can this be done on just a normal phone call? It sounds really silly, but I probably typically spend about 3 hours walking a day because I'm just on the phone rather than Zoom. And it's surprising when you do ask the question, can I just do this as a call? Most of the time it is yes. And I mean, I stand up most of the time for this type of thing. So yeah, if we've got any other questions, folks, thanks, Anne-Marie. Thank you for asking and being the first one. I'm hoping for an avalanche of people now.
Chris, I was just going to jump in on that.
Yeah,
and you know, the junior leader piece was of interest to me, and I think it ties in with what both Mike and Chris were saying, is, you know, kind of think alternatively, maybe, you know, but also the biggest factor when you're kind of relatively new to management leadership, or you know, you just want to be a leader within a team, which is all of us, is, you know, the one thing every one of us can do is get to know the people in their team better. Yeah, we can all do that, and you should be actively doing that. Zoom fatigue is a massive issue. So like Chris said, you know, invite your colleague the other side of the country or wherever, the other side of the city, to go for a walk, and you will call at them, and you'll both be walking and have a conversation at the same time, and you know, just have really short conversations, you know, 10-minute check-ins with a single team member. So it's that one-to-one relationship, getting to know your team a bit better. That will always pay dividends.
Thank you, Nick. Lisa, I might pick you for the next one if that's all right. Maybe
Sure.
perhaps Julie. It's somewhat related to what we've spoken about, but perhaps a bit more specific about well-being, mental health, and budget cuts as well. A little bit building on what Anne-Marie was mentioning. Julie, if you'd be happy sharing your question.
Yeah, I mean, I am a wellbeing champion at work, but sometimes it is difficult to try and just maintain positivity and wellbeing with such a lot of negative things happening within the organisation. And you know, you don't want to be too upbeat when there are people's jobs at risk, and it's just kind of, you know, hints and tips with kind of no spend budget cuts, you know, and just how to manage, you know, all of that without it becoming too weighty on, you know, on kind of well-being champions themselves.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. It's similar if you looked at things externally. Like, for example, you can't continue on with business as usual things when you're being tone deaf to what's going on in the world. You know, it's, as an example, this is our AWIN's 20th anniversary. So we had planned all these campaigns to do this year externally, promoting our 20th year. Obviously, this isn't a time to talk about celebrating 20 years when you're in the middle of a global pandemic. So I think it's almost a similar thing with internally. You want to make sure that you're supporting people and maintaining positivity and motivation, but not being kind of tone deaf to what's going on in the world. And I think that's where that personal touch comes into play that Mike was talking about, where, you know, really getting to know your teams and having those conversations. And I think where we would get a lot with Pecan, for example, it's anonymous. So people, they can comment on how they're feeling, where they're feeling support is lacking, or where they're feeling we, as a business, we could do more. And you can comment and directly in that and keep it as an anonymous conversation if they don't want to make themselves known, or obviously invite them to have a separate conversation where you carry on that conversation. Oh, can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It's just my thing popped up. So I think where you can really try and have those one-to-one interactions and deal with them. I know it might be difficult when you work in a larger organization, but I think there's a lot that you can do on a small budget. You know, one of the things we did was looked up all different types of wellness that we wanted to support. So for mental health, we found loads of like YouTube channels that were completely free, and you can just embed that. We just embedded them with like an RSS basically into, it's not RSS anymore, I don't know what they call it, just embedding it into our intranet. So people could just watch meditations, they could watch things to help them sleep better at night. Some things that came through were people talking about how they were having really quite disturbing, vivid dreams during this time where they never remembered dreams before. So, and I think a lot of us aren't very well equipped to handle some of those things because, you know, I'm not a mental health expert. All I have are my own experiences and the fact that it's something I feel quite passionately about. So I think it's really just being a good listener and trying to have those conversations and linking people to different articles and different channels where they can go and explore things that are going to be most beneficial and useful to them individually. But I think a lot of times people just want to feel that they're being heard. They want to feel that that someone cares. And I think a lot of that when you have these one-to-one conversations, certainly for my team, that was sort of how we did it. We would have our weekly sort of coffee catch up where everyone dialed in and it was a bit of fun and we'd all kind of cheers and toast and stuff. But I would always reach out to them individually and ask how they were. And another thing that I found really useful is, you know, you think about people that take a sick day. People call in sick that I have a stomach ache or I have a migraine or, you know, I have the flu or whatever it will be. You never hear, very rarely are you going to get someone call in sick and say, listen, I'm really suffering from depression, or I feel really anxious right now, so I'm not coming in today, because there's this stigma around it being a mental health day. So again, another thing I tried to normalize within my team, and we did this when Chris, when you came and presented at the marketing workshop that we had back in Feb, which was the last time we were all together in person, was this idea is like, you don't need to make up an excuse saying that you have a stomach bug. If you genuinely do not have the mental capacity to do your job well today, this week, whatever it might be, take a day, take the time that you need. And so I made that a very clear statement to them. And I said, you know, if you feel more comfortable just saying that you have a stomach bug, but a few people had said that they'd admitted to like lying about being sick when really they just were feeling a bit overwhelmed, feeling a little bit stressed out, and just needed a day. So a few people actually took advantage of like a mental sick day through this time. And they called me first thing in the morning and just said, listen, I'm really feeling really anxious today, not sure where it's coming. And it was like, we kind of talked through it. Again, I'm not a therapist, but they all reached out to me after saying that it made them feel better, that they felt that they would be supported with that just by being open and honest. And then they came back, you know, however many days later, you know, really strong, really productive and motivated. And I think a lot of it is just taking the time to listen and really having those conversations where you can.
I see you nodding, Mike, and a thumbs up from Julie as well. So thank you so much, Lisa. We've not got much left. I mean, the theme for this month at Innerfit was ambition. So we're going to be ambitious and try and get through all the questions that everyone's posted. So maybe Jen, if you want to go next, and then Minesh will come to yourself and fire them at whoever you think is most relevant. Nick, Mike, Lisa are doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Jen.
Thanks, guys. So my question is a little bit geared towards Lisa and Mike. So we talked a lot about how employee well-being is now and as related to firefighting COVID, but I'd love to touch on kind of the future of this. So if there's more of a business change or business need for employee well-being, and I think Mike put a nod to culture change, I would have thought organizations need to relook at your planning and workforce sourcing for more of the culture, well-being, and strategic HR roles. So in your industries, have you seen anything like that? And if not, how do you think we can get those loud and screaming?
Do you want to go first, Lisa, or shall I jump in?
Go on, Mike, you go first.
So in every part of our business, we have a strategic planning session, and we set budgets, and we put a lot of time, and we consult lots of experts and bring it in. But actually, for some reason, a lot of businesses don't do that around culture. And actually, I think that's something that's starting to change. And I think with the advent of events like this, that is coming into the mainstream. So the first thing is have a plan, a clear and concise business plan, which is well communicated across the business as to where you see that you are now and where you want to get to, and then what steps that you look to implement to get yourself there. And I think what Lisa and Nick have both touched on really well is that you have to be genuine. You have to actually care about employee well-being to improve employee well-being. You don't need to solve it, as Lisa was saying, particularly around mental health issues, that there are things that can't be solved, they can only be managed, and actually your job isn't to solve them, and you're not an expert. You shouldn't be in that position, but actually by caring and listening, you can actually assist and be a support mechanism, and actually providing those kind of mechanisms will really help. But they are sort of specific things that you're doing, and they need to tie into a broader strategy, because otherwise what you end up doing is a yoga session here or a workshop here, and it's all got to align into a structure. So now is your perfect time. It's when all of your business leaders are free and willing to chat about this sort of stuff and actually spend a proper amount of time building the plan, and then that will come through into the deliverables.
I think it's a really interesting point as well in terms of making the business case for well-being, because everyone's doing it now because it's the right thing to do if they're able to in terms of finances. But Lisa, I'm interested on your perspective on whether or not there's going to be more roles for a well-being manager, and how existing employees can get more involved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, that would be something that sits with our HR department. But I think one of the things that we found was that, you know, you hear a lot of businesses say, we care about well-being, we care about our staff, we're investing in well-being, but they don't actually have a strategy or a plan to back it up. And I talk a little bit about this in my article as well. And I think that's where this has kind of forced people to, you have to back it up. This isn't just paying lip service anymore. What we've seen is people spending 12 weeks in lockdown, some of them with children at home, some of them with elderly parents that they're looking after, trying to carry on doing their day job, feeling a bit anxious, feeling stressed, overwhelmed, being locked inside. Thankfully, in most places, we've had really nice weather, which has helped a little bit. But I think, you know, it is going to be a bit of a culture change where people are actually going to have to start putting their money where their mouth is. And it isn't just saying that you care about well-being, and exactly what you said, Mike. It's not about saying, oh, well, we're going to offer once a week a yoga class. It's a strategy. It's an actual strategy around what is it that is going to be the most beneficial to the most number of people that we can put in place on a regular basis, that we're properly investing in people. And it goes back to Chris, kind of like your motto, which is one of the first things that drew me to Innerfit in the beginning, was if you don't feel well, you don't work well, or if you feel well, you work well, I should say. So it's this idea that, you know, and it comes down to every part of feeling, emotional, physical, mental, all of it. So, you know, we have a duty of care as leaders in businesses to support our staff. And that is really going to be where the step change comes. And I think some of the businesses that really would have shied away from remote working, offering flexibility, having any sort of investment will have seen what their staff are capable of in this time with giving them a bit of autonomy and flexibility. And I'm hoping that they all stand up and say, well, actually, we were wrong, that we were wrong to think that we couldn't offer this because look at how successful it's been. Now, I know that won't be the case for everybody, but hopefully for most people it is. And I think that's really where these new roles and responsibilities might come into play. So it's not something that we're looking at necessarily hiring a devoted person to it specifically, but we do have a very strong HR team, and they've been putting together and since released a wellness strategy, and it's different. We've hosted it on our intranet, and it's broken down across, here's all the things we're doing to support you from a physical well-being perspective and emotional well-being and mental health perspective as well. And I think there's a lot that you can do that can come from with a small budget. And if you really want to put the investment in with having speakers come in or having therapy and different kinds of sessions and stuff of some of the things, Chris, what we've spoken about, there's a lot that you can do. I mean, it's like how long's a piece of string. So I think it's going to be a really big year for that culture change that Mike was talking about, and a big year of opportunity to see who sort of steps up.
Thanks, Lisa. We're going to keep being ambitious. Nick, I'm interested on your perspective on a few questions from Minesh. If you want to go on communication, we'll bring it quite specific again. And then Rapinda, if you want to potentially build on that question, because I like your bit about stiff upper lip, the British stiff upper lip. If we've got any tips on communication. So Minesh, and then Rapinda.
Yeah, so guys, in terms of communication, I have worked in wellbeing for the last 20 years and a lot more involved with the company I'm working now. As I've got more involved, I've been having the conversation with various leaders to say there's so much around communicating all the good things that are available to people in their different situations. So you've got social well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being. But then within those, you've got different groups. You've got people that have got families. You've got people that are living on their own. You've got people that have got disabilities as well. And I guess what I'm saying is that we all have a good thing to put forward, but it can be quite overwhelming just trying to fine-tune it. Some people think that sending an email every day is acceptable. Some people think once a week is acceptable. So I've said, all along that basically, if you ask people regularly, how is the information you're getting? Is it helping? How often do you want to see it? Is that adding to the level of comms you're doing? What sort of strategies do you guys personally use in your businesses, which obviously is successful?
Thanks, Minesh. Rapinda, if you want to jump on that and piggyback just really quickly. If not, Nick, we'll come to you, and I think you've already made a dent in those answers in the chat as well. So that'd be great.
I've been trying, because I'm just cognizant at the time, and I've like probably lots of us have got hard finish at 3. So I've been trying to answer the questions whilst the panelists have been giving amazing answers as well. Communication is at the crux of everything that we do and everything inherently that we do as humans, really. There are so many different ways to do it, and it ties in with the other point, and we see this in NHS. We just don't have, there isn't budgets. There aren't budgets to do lots of fancy things, and people always think well-being, we need to put on lots of events and do lots of fancy things. I would say keep it basic, and again, it comes down to kind of that leadership pillar of understanding your team really well and what communication style will work well for you. There isn't a blanket answer. Not that, and my gut feeling and my experience with all the organizations that I'm interacting with, which is quite a lot at the moment, is the more fancy it is, the less likely it's going to embed, or the longer it's going to take to embed. So, Chris and he calls me on my phone and I answer, and we have a conversation, and we bond really well in a very short space of time. There was a mention there about people who aren't that tech savvy. That's a simple solution. So I would say keep it simple, and largely speaking, the more in touch you are with your team as a leader, the better.
Nick, thank you so much. You are right. And I think Mike and John, I wanted to come to your question as well. Mike, Lisa, we could probably talk for another hour, I think. But being mindful of everyone's time, and maybe some of us want to go out and get sunburn, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to our panel and for everyone joining. And just close up with our last little question. If you would like to have a chat to us about wellbeing, then please let us know. But Nick, Mike, Lisa, everyone who asked a question and got involved on the chat, whether you were honest and shared being frustrated, or were a little bit silly and just said you were hungry, it's still audience engagement and participation which counts. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to use the emojis in the bottom, wave, thumbs up, etc. But over and out. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Audio